Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the afternoon session of the conference. I am delighted to bring to you the continuation of the theme Services Sector Liberalization and Business Opportunities. And as promised, we have 5 interesting and perhaps hot topics to be presented this afternoon. And with that, with no more ado, allow me to call upon the session chairman, who absolutely needs no introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Engineer Chew Kok Beng, President of the Institution of Engineers Malaysia.
Good afternoon. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming. It is very good to see at least more than half the morning crowd still around here. I was afraid that I have to come here and ask the speakers to go downstairs and fill up the quorum sometimes in the afternoon. So I believe enough publicity has been given, so they are staying back to enjoy the afternoon sessions. So first and foremost, I think I would like to invite all the 5 paper presenters up to the stage. First, of course, is Dr. Engineer Haji Abdul Rashid bin Maidin. He is representing the board, President of the Board of Engineers Malaysia, Dr. Seri Muhammad Noor. Can you please come up? Give him a big hand. Next is a young lady, Miss K. Karuna Jyoti. Would you like to come up? See, nowadays the ladies, the younger they are, the more powerful they are. You look so young. Next speaker, Mr. Aziz Tan Sri Bahaman from the Master Builders Association. They build everything for us. And next speaker this afternoon is Mr. Muhammad Yazid Jafar, CEO of Johor Petroleum Development Corporation. And the last speaker of the day is none other than Engineer Dr. Abdul Majid Dato' Abu Qasim, past President of the Association of Consulting Engineers Malaysia, currently here to represent the President of the Association of Consulting Engineers Malaysia. Give them a big hand. So the rule of the afternoon is each speaker will be given 25 minutes, and the question and answer session will be at the end of the day, but then we have an exception to the rule at the request of Miss Karuna Jyoti. She is going to catch a flight back to Kuala Lumpur. So immediately after a paper, we will allow a question and answer session. Okay, thank you. We agree on that. Now, following what was done this morning, as far as the CV of the speakers are concerned, they are all very well listed up in a little book. So I don't want to bore you with that. They are all very eminent people, distinguished people. And the only thing I would like you to maybe look at is the photograph of the first speaker. Does he look like the first speaker? If you don't agree, we send him home and ask for the first speaker to come. So I myself got shocked when I saw his picture. I thought somebody else. Okay, that is a simple rule of the day, and I have to be very strict because I've been told that it's a dinner function tonight. So we have to finish it by hook or by crook at 5 p.m. So if you have any questions that you want to ask, you can pen it like this morning, put it on a piece of paper and pass it to the secretariat. Put your hands up, the secretariat around the room will pick up your question so that we can bring it up later in the day. Or if you like to show people how beautiful your voice is, you can use the mic and ask your question. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to invite the first speaker, Dr. Engineer Haji Abdul Rashid bin Maidin. His topic is on initiatives towards regional liberalization of engineering and related service. The paper will focus very much on the ASEAN Framework Agreement. He has spent many, many years involved in the National Monitoring Committee of Malaysia to look into the mobility of engineering services, and I'm sure he would like to share many of his experiences with you, how successful we can be. So, Engineer Rashid, would you like?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Mr. Chu forgot, the moment I takes over the microphone, he cannot stop me. It is my call. If I have to say for 1 hour, I will say for 1 hour. What choice does he has? After all, we come here to talk, and he is stopping us from talking. Anyway, first and foremost, I would like to thank very much for the kind introduction of myself by my colleague, Engineer Choe Kok Beng, the chairman of the conference, Mr. David Lee, IEM Southern Branch. Thank you for inviting me and giving me a chance to share what I had. Fellow colleagues and fellow participants, salam sejahtera and salam satu Malaysia. I want to be like a politician too. First and foremost, I just would like to take a little bit of time, and this time you should not include in my talk, because I have to tell you why I ran away from the room while Rebecca was giving a talk. I got a call saying that somebody passed away in my room. Okay, so I rushed and I found out that the friend that I saw last night, he passed away on a heart attack. So I had to organize him to go back to Shah Alam, and he happened to be an architect, and his son also is an architect. If all of you still remember, he's Dato' Haji Sanat. So he passed away in this hotel. He came for the Mubarak function. So with that, before I start, could I know the composition of the participant present today? How many of you are engineers? Wow, thank you. Then I do not have to get worried. Can I get the first slide? In this presentation, you would come across of many terms that are unfamiliar to you. And my advice, please do not get bored. The topic could sound taboo to you. You can't avoid it, and you can't run away from it. Please believe me, it will be at your doorsteps sooner than you expect. In this short period, please allow me to cover some of the slides. I'm quite worried that Majid is going to say the same thing, because we are from the board and we share the same thing. So I don't know what he took, I don't know what I took. So if at all I have said first, I pity him. But never mind, he is going to repeat and make you understand better. All right? Okay? So I will cover on GATS, WTO, AFAS, CCS, MRA on engineering services, the function of ACP, ECC, monitoring country, and AFAS. ACP is, so whether we are ready towards achieving 2020 is another question that we will debate. Next. So basically, these next two slides are just the contents. Next. The Act has changed many times for some obvious reason. In the early 60s, the changes in the Act was due. 1. Primarily to plug the loopholes of the profession involved many new changes. Second, many failures has taken place in many building and engineering works in the country. That some amendments becomes very vital today. So much so today, the state of Terengganu is about to change its name to Terengganu Darul Runtuh. Too many failures in Terengganu. The room is collapsing every now and then. Next. No, the earlier one. This, the overview of the previous amendments. There were about 6 times that the Registration of Engineers Act has changed. Architect has changed 9 times. Quantity surveyors have changed about 8 times. All right. Next. Today, the Board of Engineers has decided to do some changes and amendments to the Act. The time the amendments and changes came about to facilitate the government's commitments in international free trade agreements. Next. Again, this slide, I think his slide. The free trade agreements focuses on liberalization of goods and supply of services. First, the goods. Reduction in tariff, I think everybody knows that. Disbandment of non-tariff barriers. Whereas services like us, we have the basic 4 modes of supply, which I'm going to give a test after this. Next. This slide, again, you've seen everywhere. It's including also in our souvenir book program, which basically tells us what are we looking at, and the various countries involved in the trade agreements. Next. The slide basically shows Malaysia's liberalization efforts and the current commitments in international FTAs. While all the FTAs are equally important, Malaysia is focusing on the regional trade agreements. See, they have so many agreements. Sometimes we also lost count. Sometimes we don't even understand what agreements are there. Every now and then we recall to the ministry and see, oh, that is one agreement to be signed. We have Malaysia-India agreement. They start asking all kind of questions. They are prepared to know what we can give, but they are not prepared to say what they can give, you know. So sometimes it goes one way, some of the agreements. But ironically, WTO's emphasis was more on multilateral approach, whereas I think ASEAN started with bilateral, and now we are talking about the basic AFAS, which is a regional agreement signed by 10 ASEAN countries. In fact, if you were to see how was the WTO was formed, and basically WTO negotiation was all on negotiations, and they all started agreements on negotiations. They agree, then they give the offers, they give the commitments by individual countries, and then we have to follow according to the commitments. Next. Now, if you were to look this slide, this is where I've said that this end is the bilateral. Now we are more emphasizing on the regional, which is AFAS, and the other one is multilateral, which is by WTO. But all these agreements, which is nothing new, is all started from WTO, and then we inherited a lot of things. Some is applicable, some is not applicable, but somehow or other we go ahead even though it's not really applicable to us. So the dotted one in red shows what we are going to emphasize, which is the AFAS. Next. Now, before we start, let us understand the definition of liberalization. What is liberalization? Liberalization is the relaxation or the removal or reduction of the government restrictions, usually in areas of social and economic policy. then how it can happen? Reduce government involvement in business. Simple. You see? And the removal of barriers to do business. This includes the removal of reduction both tariff, duties and surcharges and non-tariff obstacles like license, rules, quotas and other requirements. So we have also quite a number of quotas. If you want to compete, all these things need to be removed. Why we need such a situation? Create more favorable investment environment characterized by ease of conducting business. The ease of eradication of these restrictions often refer to free trade. So that's what they wanted. So that foreigners or even the local, when there is no any barriers, then the competition is open to all. Next. Before we talk about AFAS, let's see the instrument used by government to trade liberalization. Next. You see, it started with ASEAN, the formation of ASEAN. ASEAN is meant for ASEAN of Southeast Asia nations. It started with 5 countries. I can't remember the year, it's too far. So these are the 5 founding members. Yeah. Then they call it, these 5 countries, 5 declaration. For almost 16 years, they continued their partnership, coordination, and emphasize. We found out that they had to invite the other 5 countries. So after about 16 years, there you see there are the dates given, which the other 5 countries has joined in. So thus ASEAN is currently a regional group consisting of 10 member countries. Next. Again, objective and aims of ASEAN. I think I don't know how to deliberate this because you can see everywhere you can see. So first I thought just to give you some insight of it, but time is catching up. I don't think it is important for us, but it's definitely everywhere. Next. And the modus of operandi basically signifies what to do, how to do under the declaration and agreement. Next. This is something which is quite important. Basically, the establishment of ASEAN Committee, the ASEAN Economic Committee. I think even the Singapore ambassador did mention about this ASEAN Economic Committee. Basically, again, I've just given a little write-up how this came about. Because WTO, EU, all these big countries start discussing business on bloc countries. So they block themselves and they decide to. So taking the cognizance of this approach, therefore ASEAN, somewhere in the ASEAN summit in 2008, if I'm not mistaken, they decided to have this economic committee. The declaration was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was in Cebu Declaration. So having the 3 pillars, basically political, security, economic committee, and socio-cultural committee. So our emphasis is the second one, which is economic committee. And of course, it's again to foster better trade facilitation. Next. Now, this general agreement on trade and services is basically GATS. And then we are now talking about ASEAN Framework Agreement on Services. Basically, what we have offered in GATS, when we came to ASEAN, is actually ASEAN Plus. So we have given slightly more than what we have given in GATS. So actually, there's not much difference between GATS and AFAS. But only thing the offers in AFAS was definitely much better because it was a regional agreement. We wanted to foster a better relationship between ASEAN, and we are looking at, I think, 600 million population. Next. Now, Now, some of the examples of articles. These are the various rules and regulations that they have in GATS. The rules are stipulated, everything that's rule. You know, if you agree and if you don't comply, there's also a mechanism to catch you. If you don't agree, they will say why you don't agree. If you offer something less that you've offered under bilateral agreement, you also kena. So therefore, it is very transparent. If you offer to somebody, you have to offer the same to all other countries if you have entered into the agreement. Despite of saying that, I better read this, which is too far. Next, please. So, as I said, GATS came into existence in April 1994, and the instruments used by WTO. It established a multilateral framework of principles and rules for trade and services, trade done and under conditions of transparency, progressive liberalization, and a means of promoting the economic growth. That was the emphasis, which is progressive. That means every country will progressively liberalize. They have to give a little bit. When the time comes, we all must be ready. Here are some of the GATS articles and clauses that I see just now. One of the articles did clearly emphasize that. It should be noted that with the introduction of GATS, governments still have the power and the right to regulate. That's one thing good about this GATS. Even though you commit, even though you have given the commitments, you still have the right to regulate. The right to introduce new regulations, even after commitment to GATS. Okay. Next. So before I say about AFAS, I would like to say about what was the perception of trade in services traditionally. Trade in services was considered not trade-able, and it was not storable. However, in the recent years, services have become more trade-able as a result of technical progress. World exports of goods and commercial services have almost doubled since year 2000. The disparity between the benefit achieved by the developed countries and non-developed countries were huge, and as such, trade in services must be liberalized into a warranted and accepted by all member countries. Now, in the earlier slides, I will explain about GATT, WTO, and GATS, and how the members operationalize their liberalization by progressive in nature. Taking cognizance of their modus operandi, AFAS then came into establishment. This is one of the most important instruments used by the government in our trade facilitation. Next. So these are the various agreements, declarations that the 10 ASEAN countries has made, and trying to give more input into AFAS, and as such, AFAS can start operating in the ASEAN countries. Next. Definitely, in whether it's in GATS or in AFAS, the four modes of supply, which has been discussed, is mode 1, cross-border supply, mode 2, consumption abroad, mode 3, commercial presence, mode 4, movement of natural person. Having said the four modes in the early slide, what will be the enabling instruments for AFAS to address the said four modes? So the signing of MRA on engineering services by the ASEAN economic ministers had arose to the formation of ACP-ECC. Now, I would like to iterate this simply because the signing of this ACP-ECC, we had several discussions with all the 10 ASEAN countries. So basically, the 10 ASEAN countries are in different situations. Some has, some don't even have professional regulatory authority. Some doesn't even have the National Monitoring Committee. Some don't even have their infrastructure. So when we started the MRA, some of the countries like Singapore and Malaysia had to educate most of the other ASEAN countries in order for them to understand what is accepted or able to be done in the MRA. So today we are quite happy. You will see in the next slide that the comments given by the various ASEAN countries. Next. So when you look at the ACPC and the initiatives and implementing strategies, the ACPC Secretariat is currently located in Jakarta. It facilitates the administration and process and maintains an ACER, which is the ASEAN Chartered Engineer Register. The Secretariat issues the certificates to the successful ACPEs, ASEAN Chartered Professional Engineers, through the various MCs. That is how the operandi is, and it is in the MRA, and it is a living document in the ASEAN Secretariat. What I would like to emphasize is this. Because of the different ability of each countries, so maybe Malaysia, Singapore, even Vietnam for that matter has got a lot of ACPEs registered with us. Okay? So one would wonder why we call it ACPEs. I better tell you the story too. We remember that in Thailand, because I was the main drafter of this agreement, so we were all interested in trying to call ASEAN Professional Engineer. No, sorry, ASEAN Chartered Engineer. So Thailand objected. Thailand says that you cannot use charter because it is India Act that charter is being used. So therefore, any ASEAN countries cannot use the word charter. So, see, the spirit on ASEAN negotiations is unanimous. So if one object, we have to agree with them to change the name. Then they gave the name ASEAN Professional Engineer. So somehow or other it came into my mind. When I said I wanted ASEAN Chartered Engineer, they disagreed. They wanted ASEAN Professional Engineer. So I told them, I don't mind to be an ace, but not an 8, I told them. Because ASEAN Professional Engineer will be, ended up people calling us 8. You see? So then Singapore was with us. I got a warning. So, so at the end of the day, it was a compromise between Malaysia and Thailand. So we took both inside, ASEAN Chartered Professional Engineer. So both is inside. So that's why it became ACPE for those who.
So now we are not an ape, so it's okay.
So don't worry, we are not an ape. My dear fellow colleagues, other requirements in the MRA were also the participating country agrees to submit the assessment statement and the establishment of the MCs. So every country in the MRA should establish their own MCs. They have to establish their own, they have to come with the assessment statement. And then they have to notify ACPC, which is the ASEAN body. So when they notify, then they become an accepted body in ASEAN, so that whatever they do in the ACPEC is considered as official. So therefore, there are processes in that nature. So far, the effort of ACPC has been creating the ACPER. So far, I think the function of the ACPE has been creating only ACPER. There is what they do is they have a register, they approve the ACPEs, they will keep the names, they will then keep in the secretariat and it will become a living document in Bangkok as since our ASEAN office is in Bangkok. But at the moment, the secretariat for operationalization is Jakarta, and Jakarta is keeping the website, and therefore they are responsible to maintain certain requirements.
I think Dr. Rashid, I think it's maybe you stop at this point. Then during the question and answer time, you can tell us about your test. Now that we have let you
maybe I just conclude with the test. Okay. Can you go to the pictures?
We can do it during the question and answer
time.
Only one.
Okay. The pictures. I just want to make sure that these people understand what I want to talk. It's unfortunate that I even did a flow chart also to make you understand, but I don't have enough time. So go again, come on. There's a picture of a doctor. Okay, here. Now, if you look at this picture, it's just a quick test because this was tested to us in WTO. The patient and the nurse are foreigners. The hospital is foreign owned. And the surgery.com is based abroad. So while the doctor is trying to operate, the nurse, I think, was sleeping, I think. Nurse, get onto the internet. Go to the surgery.com, scroll down and click to the icon. Okay, now, can you help me to identify which is mode 1, mode 2, mode 3, mode 4? Anybody, please?
I'll help you. Internet is mode 1.
So, okay, internet is mode 1. Available, because you don't need to have anybody present. Now, maybe I ask you, okay, the nurse is a professional, is a talent.
Mode 4.
So mode 4, okay. The patient, mode 1, mode 2, mode 3, mode 4.
Mode 2.
Mode 2, because they consume abroad. All right, because he has to go another country to consume the services. So we address the mode 1, mode 2, mode 3, mode 4. So the next slide. Okay. This one is another slide. Okay, again, it's about the same question, but this time, the tourist and the tour guide are foreigners. This is in Thailand. The tour company are locally owned. Actually, sorry for my spelling. Locally owned. Tour information were obtained from the internet. So which is mode 1, mode 2, mode 3, mode 4?
I think it'd be difficult to get a response from the audience because they can't hear you. Maybe you? I think the tourist is mode 1.
The tourist is mode 2 because they consume abroad. Okay? The tour guide, mode 4, because it is a talent. It's professional. So therefore he has to get. The tour company is a local company. So there's no mode. Where got mode 1? If their own company, where got mode 1, mode 2? They can do anything in their own company, country. The tour information?
Mode 1.
Mode 1, because it is electronically obtained. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rashid. Now I'd like to invite Ms. K. Karuna Jyoti to spend the next 25 minutes. And please do a good one so that you can be excused with a short question and answer session. Please, the floor is for yours now.
Thank you. I'll try to keep to the time. Next, please. I think the first speaker spoke all about liberalization and regulations relating to, the trade agreements and what it means for the engineering fraternity at large. Okay, how it will change your mode of business and your operating environment. What I will do today is I'll talk to you about SMEs, which most of you are, most of the engineers are, or most of the companies are anyway, and how SMEs have contributed to the economy, including the engineering fraternity, okay? What is your contribution in terms of numbers as well as in terms of contribution to the GDP, and also to look forward on how government policies can help you in the development of SMEs. Okay, with that, can we move on, please? All right, so this is just the background on SME development. Before we move on to talking about SMEs, I thought it was quite good to give you a little bit backdrop of what's happening in Malaysia on SMEs. Go back, please. And then move on to the services sector and also the contribution of engineering, and then the programs and incentives that we have and the long-term policies. Next, please. Okay, so how do we define SMEs in this country? How do we define SMEs in this country? Basically, the criteria, the current criteria was, or the definition that we have right now has been adopted since 2005. Okay, it's based on two criteria, basically annual sales turnover and number of employees. Okay, and we have got two categories, that is the manufacturing-related services and agro-based. That's one segment. The other is services, ICT, and primary agriculture. So anything below 25 million annual sales or employees of 150 workers and below are actually considered as SMEs in the manufacturing sector, whereas for the services sector, the threshold is smaller, less than 5 million sales turnover or less than 50 workers. And for your information, just in July, we have revised the definition. Basically, not much change, except for the fact that we have raised the threshold. We have raised the threshold now. For the manufacturing sector, it's less than 50 million, so it's doubled from 25 million, and less than or up to 200 workers. And for the services sector, is up to 20 million or up to 75 workers. So, I mean, if you have a company and if your sales turnover is 25 million, but you employ 60 workers, okay, and you're in the services sector, you're engineering, then actually you're deemed as an SME because under the employment, you qualify. Okay, just an example. Okay, move on, please. All right, so SMEs, if you look at the latest statistics, they contribute about 97.3% of total establishments in this country. We have about 645,000 SMEs in this country from the total 662 establishments, and bulk of them are actually micro enterprises, less than 5 workers, okay, about 77% or 75% of the total establishments in this country. But if you look at SMEs alone, it's 77%. And as Dato' Rebecca had mentioned this morning, 90% of the SMEs are in the services sector. So basically, most of the SMEs are in the services sector. And if you look by one of the major categories is distributive trade, okay? And of course, you also have the restaurants segment. After that is like manufacturing only account for 6% because in terms of numbers, this is not contribution to GDP and so on. Okay, moving on. So business and professional services, this is where engineering services is. Okay, they constitute about 6.5% of total SMEs in the services sector. Okay, and around 37,000 of the business services segment are actually SMEs. And moving on, if you look at what has happened in the past on SME development, this is a little bit story on SME development. In the past, this is from the policy perspective, the government has a lot of programs and policies for SMEs in this country, and they're done by the various ministries and agencies. And prior to 2004, these policies were done separately, okay, the programs and everything. So at one point of time, people didn't have a handle on, okay, how many programs are there in this country, or what's the policy like, and how effective these policies have been or the programs have been. And worst of all, we didn't know how much of it there was duplication between the ministries as well. So at one point of time, this started with the central bank because there were a lot of noises on the ground. People were saying there's not enough financing and things like that. So we wanted to know actually what is the issue, real key issues that were faced by SMEs. Was it really financing or other issues? So based on all this work that was done, they found that actually SMEs have got a lot of structural issues beside financing. They're structurally very weak, okay? And this cuts across all segments, be it in the manufacturing or services or agriculture sector. Of course, the sector is different, but the problems are common across the SMEs. And so at that point of time, a council was set up in 2004. A National SME Development Council is chaired by the Prime Minister, and all the ministries, the ministers from these 14 ministries, that means half the cabinet are there, okay? They sit together to talk about policies and programs. Okay, the main mandate is actually to look at a comprehensive, holistic way, a structured way of looking at SME development for the country across all sectors, and to come up with a broad policy. What is the policy direction for SME? Because, you know, if you have Ministry of Agriculture, they know for agriculture, this is the policy we have. But what is it for SMEs? Okay, so we came out with a national policy direction as well. And the most of all is to coordinate the programs and policies across the ministries and agencies to ensure effectiveness and efficacy in implementation. All right, so at that point of time, first thing that they did was they come out with a common definition. Before that, every ministry had their own definition, even agencies had their own, so it was so complicated. And, you know, a businessman going from one to the other ministry, sometimes you qualify as an SME in this ministry, but when you go the other side, sorry, the criteria is different. So it made things very difficult. So it came a common definition, 205, and of course there was statistics, a census was done, and came out with a policy as well. And we had human development, HR development, as well as advisory. A lot of training programs were done, and there was centralization of these training programs at PSMB, or, you know, the Human Resource Development body. And also information. What happened was the secretariat to the NSDC, back then was the central bank, Bank Negara. Later now is SME Corp, where I come from, okay? And the information is basically on, we compile all from the ministries, what are the programs and that are being implemented, and we track them, and to ensure whether these programs are actually being, and even funds and schemes, are they being implemented on time, and what is it, or the utilization, why is it not working, and things like that. And also it came out with new financial products like microfinance scheme in 2006, okay, Pembiayaan Macro, and also guarantee schemes and so many other things. And some of the DFIs, Development Financial Institutions, were restructured. You have Agro Bank, you have SME Bank and things like that. And you had this SME Credit Bureau and all that. So this was the institutional framework that was put in place. So a lot of things took place after 2005, okay, until now. And what we see is, we see the results in the sense that this is the GDP, the red line is the GDP of SMEs versus the blue line, which is the GDP of the overall country. So we actually have GDP for SMEs as well. And what it shows is since 2004, actually, the GDP of the country has been growing at a faster pace, okay? I'm sorry, the line has actually supposed to be in 2004, it's somehow moved. So, and it's after that, that was, I think I must have made the chart smaller and I forgot to push the line. Okay, having said that, that the SMEs have been growing at a faster pace since 2004, and actually it's around 6.3% per annum versus the overall economy about 4.5%. Having said that, in terms of contribution to the economy, it's still quite, it could be better. Okay, it's only about 1/3, 32%. If you compare with high-income countries, it's about 50%. Most of the advanced economies range between 40 to 60%. And if you looked at high middle-income countries like us, an average is around 39%. So we are still on the low side. Okay. And if you look at, now we move on to the ETP, Economic Transformation Program. Engineering services is part of business and professional services segment in the NKEAs, and it accounts about 9% of that, okay? Just to give you some handle on where engineering services actually stands right now. And this is one of the segments that has been growing quite fast. Okay, during the period 2000 to 2009, it was one of the fastest growing at the time, 7.9% per annum. And during the period 2010 to 2012, we see around 7.5%. So it's still running at 7%, much faster than the other sectors. And in terms of BPS, I do not have, I'm sorry, this is BPS, Business and Professional Services, not engineering per se, but engineering is a segment. So in terms of contribution to GDP is about 4 to 5%. Okay, that's the contribution of business. And if you look at business and professional services, they actually are the real estate activity and IT services and professional services like engineering, auditing, accounting, medical and all that. All right, so moving forward, SMEs in this segment, in the services segment, including your segment, face numerous challenges from changing environment as well as liberalization of markets. And as what Dato' Rebecca has said, it's not just challenges. We should not look at it negatively because opening up our markets is actually a good thing in the long term. Okay, it will make the companies more competitive and you become more globalized. At the same time, there are a lot of opportunities that you should leverage on. So if you look at the inherent and structural issues that there are, the issue, I think, like most of the small service providers, I think even engineering services, a lot of them are fragmented, okay, and small, and firms, and some segments are not regulated. I understand that the integrated engineering services are not regulated, so that could be a back way for foreign companies to come here and, that kind of thing. So that could be one of the issues that we need to look at, moving forward. And the other thing is constraints to market. These are the usual issues or constraints that SMEs face, constraint to market, financing, innovation, human capital development, skills, and all that. And all these short-term challenges also come by, these are from the cyclical factors. Right now, the global economy is not doing well. Of course, it will hit us as well. So these are things, the short-term things, the cyclical factors that will affect us. And of course, meanwhile, we have the long-term challenges that come about from globalization, liberalization, changing trends, changing fashion and all that. So basically, small firms lack the capacity and capability and the muscle, to move on and to be competitive on a bigger scale. So with that, I think we need to move forward and look at how this liberalization can also bring about new opportunities for SMEs, okay? So, but to leverage on that, of course, you have to build up capacity. So if you are going out anywhere, you can be a first mover advantage, because you did say just now you have the mutual recognition and things like that. And Malaysia being in the forefront in construction activity and all, I think we are there already in some of the segments, and engineering services must be up to some level already. And you're ready to go out. Many of the companies, it's just that you must know where to go. And I'll later come to one of the programs where we actually have to actually assist companies that are going out newly. So first mover advantage, of course, if you go to a country that not many development has taken place, then you will be the first to go, of course, and more competitive with global acceptance, of course. That means you have to have all this standards and stuff like that, become part of the global network. I'm not sure whether engineering services really, but manufacturing it is, because most of our SMEs are in tier 2, tier 3. They have to move up to tier 1 if they want to be close to the MNCs and the network. And also, at the same time, we'll be able to attract FDIs into our country when we open up, and the ability to ride out the business cycles, because now that you have more markets that you can go to, so if supposing the domestic economy is not doing well, at least you can go somewhere. And the good news is the regional trade is doing very well, and that's why Asia is an area of growth, while Europe and US is not doing well. Moving on, so SMEs in services have huge potential. Why? Because services sector is going to be the next phase of growth. Okay, they're going to the target is for the services share to grow from 54% to 65% by 2020. Okay, and in any country, when they move from high middle income to high income country, it is normally driven, you move towards a services-based economy. So that's a natural transition that will take place. So having said that, so all services segments are very important. And if you look at advanced economies, like now, although services sector we say is very big chunk, 90% in terms of establishments and all that, but in terms of their contribution, the services could have been done, could be better, okay? And this is because a lot of the services that we have now is traditional services, retail, wholesale. They are not so high value adding activities, but the kind of services that drive growth in the advanced economies or even in Europe, Eastern Europe countries and all we see is financial services, business services. Business services has got a lot of potential, and so is yours, okay? You happen to fall in that. So basically is to make sure that we build up the domestic capacity. Remember after the Asian crisis, soon after that, we saw a lot of our manufacturing sectors, subsectors actually hollowing out, and that can actually happen here if we are not careful, okay? For all the small services segments, we may lose it because the foreign guys may come here. So that hollowing out is a threat, okay? So we need to build up capacity. And in the master plan, we have our intention is to raise the contribution of SMEs from 32% to 41%. I'll explain this later. Okay, so currently there are about 50 support programs for SMEs in the services sector, which you can avail yourself. Not many people are actually aware of this. Okay, there are training programs, there's financing, there's innovation and technology, and also market access. Market access could be more relevant. I'll spend some time later on that. Infrastructure is more the infrastructure that you need to move on. Okay, so having said that, of course, we have also initiatives in SME Corp to build capacity and capability of SMEs. One is the advisory services. So for those of you who want to have some technical advice or even come into some programs, you can come to us under the One Referral Center and we'll take you from there, okay? We guide you from there. And we have, of course, some financing schemes as well for you, and we have got skills upgrading. And we have a lot of programs with the universities and things like that. Having said that, we also have the One InnoCert. One InnoCert is a kind of a certification that we give to the innovative companies. So it can be also engineering services. If you're very innovative, then you can come, because with the One InnoCert, you can go to Green Lane. Then you can avail yourself to other incentives, okay? And we have the national mark. I'm not so sure whether it's very relevant to you, but industrial linkage and other things that we have. Okay. Moving on, we have also a tool to assess the capability of SMEs. So we have a tool with us to see how competitive you are. And this tool is called SME Competitive Rating for Enhancement. Okay. And basically, there are a few parameters that we look at, and these parameters will let us know how competitive you are. And if you look at the radar chart there, you can see that sometimes you will know that your financial capability may not be there, but your quality is there. So from this, we will be able to assess where to help you. So that's the kind of assistance we give using this. Okay, the good news is that we have a new incentive that was announced last year, and that is for merger. I'm not sure how many of you all are aware. This is to encourage mergers of small service providers so that they will become larger entities. Okay, this is mainly because of the liberalization. We were asked, and it was announced during the domestic investment. Remember, the Maida was talking about the 1 billion fund. At the same time, we announced this as well. So basically, it's to encourage firms to merge. And if you merge and you become a large firm, it doesn't matter. But before that, if you are an SME and you merge, then you are still available. Can avail to this incentive for the flat rate, tax rate of 20% on all taxable income for a period of 5 years. This is good news. You know why? Because right now you have, SMEs have a differentiated tax rate. The first 500,000 is 20%. Above that, you are the normal corporate tax. But here, everything, okay, everything. So if two good companies merge and become a large company, you can enjoy this for 5 years. And also stamp duty exemption for all the merger document and things like that. So it will be until July 2015. And the other thing is now we look into the SME master plan that we are talking about that was released last year. And this is basically looking at the long-term plan for SMEs for this country. Okay, there are 4 things that came out from the SME master plan, which is also pertinent to your segment as well. Okay, number 1 is, we did this work with the World Bank. So the findings show that SME labor productivity was far below other countries, okay, in this country. So one of the key things that came out is our labor productivity is very, very low. Okay, we are only 1/3. SMEs are only 1/3 of the large firms in Malaysia, within Malaysia. But if you compare with countries like US SMEs are 7 times more productive, and even across the board, Singapore is about 3.5 times more productive than us. Okay, that's a little bit uncomfortable in the sense that a lot of our labor is there as well in Singapore, but they are more productive than here. So there's a lot that we need to do on enhancing processes and automating and mechanizing and doing things in a more effective way. Second one is there's a material share of informal sector in the economy. I'm not so sure about yours, but there are a lot of companies that do not register, okay? Basically, they are not in the mainstream. They don't pay tax, they don't register, and nobody knows about them. So when they come, we can't help them as well. We can't help them because they are not in the radar. So in terms of, for Malaysia, it is estimated about 31% of GNI is the informal sector. That's relatively high because if you look at developing countries, of course they are 36%, but if you look at Singapore, it's only 13%, and the United States is about 9%. Okay, so it's good to bring that down, okay? So then we have a more level playing field. Next is business formation. Business formation also shows the vibrancy in the economy, and what it shows is about new entry of companies coming into the economy. And what it shows is in Malaysia, a lot of them are sole proprietorship and partnership, but not limited liability companies. So that means we need to have more limited liability because these are the guys who are serious to grow bigger, to become large companies. And the last chart is a bit funny, but basically what it shows is the first part of it, the top 1 percentile of the companies, the fastest growing companies. This is from our own data, from our statistics, shows that the fastest growing companies actually contribute to 70% of the additional GDP and about half of the total new additional jobs that are being created. So what it means is fast-growing companies are very, very important, okay? These high-growth firms. So these are the things that we need to push the button. So moving on, this is the framework. We also have a house, sir, just like yours. Okay, ours is, the end game is to have competitive SMEs, globally competitive SMEs. And why I need to stress globally competitive SMEs? Because even if you are in Malaysia, you got to be globally competitive. You know why? Foreign guys are here next to you. So you have no choice now. Whether you go abroad or you're staying in Malaysia, you got to be globally competitive. So that's why we are saying that. But the thing from SME development is also about just not economic factor alone. We are talking about enhancing wealth creation and also contributing to the social well-being, because the bottom 40%, a lot of them are SMEs as well. So ours cuts across. So remember the 4 things that I said just now? These are the 4 things that became the goals. Our goal is to raise productivity, okay, to increase business formation, expand the number of high-growth firms, and also to reduce the informality, okay, the illegal companies. Okay, the focus areas are the usual things: innovation, technology, market access, human capital, and all that. There's 6 areas. These 6 areas are actually factors that affect the performance of SMEs in Malaysia. This was all evidence-based, based from data in Malaysia. Okay, with that, we have an action plan, and what is important about this plan is we have put in place also an institutional support. What we are saying is that we have a plan, but most times plans don't get implemented because the institutional support is not there. So we are paying a lot of attention to make sure that we get that. We have to build capacity in monitoring and evaluation. People don't know anything about it. Have reliable statistics. If not, we can't do policy. Effective coordination. We have to enhance coordination among not only between the ministries and agencies, also between public and private sector, because we can do much more. All right. So there are 6 high-impact programs. Okay. There are 2 cutting across innovation. One is about a one-stop center for ease of doing business. Okay. Then there's also a financing program, and also for access. Market access is about going export, and the last one is the catalyst program for high growth firms. I'll go one by one. Okay, so the first one is talking about integration of business registration and licensing to enhance the ease of doing business. Right now, if you go, you need to register a business, then you have to go and get your licenses from different agencies and ministries. So what we are suggesting is at the end of the day to go to one portal or a single point, a single window, and you do everything at one go. Same comes for renewal. And at the same time, what we are saying is when you go for, right now, you can go, some of them can go and get licenses, but they never register. Okay? That is happening. But in this case, you cannot do that. You got to register first, then only license. So it will mandatory will bring you on board already. So less informality. Okay, the next one is about technology commercialization platform. Okay, technology commercialization platform is to encourage innovation. This is because we know that most of the SMEs are not in the national innovation system. National innovation system is the academia, the private sector, as well as the public sector. Okay, the government, the universities, and the government agencies who is giving the funding, the universities and the private sector. Because private sector wants something, the universities are doing something. So we want to see greater coordination between that. And also what we find is that SMEs find it so confusing to go from one ministry to the other. So we are now suggesting a platform to be set up, and this will be run by the private sector. Basically is to do end-to-end facilitation from the beginning, proof of concept, because this is the place where things go wrong, until commercialization. Because sometimes we have proof of concept and it ends there, it never materializes. So this is where we give end-to-end facilitation. Because of interest of time, I'll just go through fast, but I'll pause more on the export, okay? So this is a SME investment program. Basically is to provide early stage financing. It's something like VC, venture capital companies in Malaysia. We know that in Malaysia we have VCs, but not many of them are actually providing not so vibrant. And what we are suggesting is the government to come in, also to support private sector, to invest in companies in terms of equity, loan, or hybrid. Okay, so this is for those early stage, and if you want, you can come to these investment companies and they invest in you. Number 4 is the Going Export Program. Oh, it's okay, thank you. So this Going Export Program, I think is very interesting for you, because I noted a few of the speakers saying that you don't know, when you go to markets, of course you got all those regulations, okay? You say from China and you are going to say you're going to India. So the rules will be different, the regulations will be different, your competitors there will be different, the people who will be bidding with you will be different, the kind of projects that they would want from you is different. The other day I heard someone was talking about halal, and they said why Malaysia hasn't made it in Middle East. Because somebody else said that they don't like our curries. They don't like the type of things that we make, because that's not the taste bud there, okay? In Middle East want different things. So when we go wherever you're going to, okay, from India to Brazil to Africa, things are going to be different because the demands are going to be different. So you need to know that. And so what we are saying here is to have a platform also to give end-to-end facilitation, but this is customized assistance, not just going and having trade fairs and things like that. Basically to give market intelligence, link you to the traders, the importers, okay, who are going to probably import. In your case, you will probably go there to do other kind of businesses, set up there, or even provide the services, and link you to the buyers or whoever it is. And in doing that, we will probably have a kind of step-by-step on how to go to your export market. And one by one, they will be assisting you. This will be run by private sector, but it will be managed by a government, okay, owned by a government. So, and there will be some kind of matching grant. So, and who will be allowed to come into this platform? First-time exporters, that means first-time guys who are going abroad, or people who have gone abroad, but you're going to a different segment, market segment, or you're doing a different product. In engineering, I'm not very sure whether you could be doing different. I'm not very sure, but it is applicable to them. Okay, the next one is, this is for the high growth firms, okay, to encourage high growth firms to generate, because we know these are the guys who are providing the bulk of the jobs and GDP. And what we want to do is actually handhold them and give targeted assistance to these people so that they can succeed and to become the global champions and all those big companies. And the last one is inclusive innovation. I'm not sure whether many of you have heard, but this is basically, the innovation is not only in the frontier for the most sophisticated companies, but it's also to empower the bottom 40% of the SMEs and the income pyramid. So basically, there are farmers who have done a certain kind of innovation or products or machines for their for his farm, and he would like to commercialize it. He can come inside here. I will be pleased to talk to any one of you if you all are interested in this in detail. So, okay, besides this, we have got other initiatives that are thematic and also for East Malaysia. Now, moving on, basically, all these goals, we have set targets, okay? Like in terms of intensifying formalization, we want to bring the informality from 31% to 15%. Similarly, to increase business formation by about 6% per year. So at the end of the day, we want to increase the contribution of SMEs to 41%, employment to 62%, and exports to 25%. So at the end, in my concluding slide, what I would like to say is that SME growth has been consistently growing, outperforming the overall economy in the last 9 years, and we are targeting it to grow even faster. And you are going to be one of our drivers of growth. Okay? Business and professional services is an important sub-segment in the SMEs. Okay? And the master plan have got certain programs that you can actually leverage on and take advantage for this growth. And there are, of course, going to be a lot of changes in the landscape, okay, because of many things that are happening, especially with liberalization. And that would mean that only the most robust will be, be able to survive. And there are a lot of capacity building have to take place, okay? And at the end of the day, from the government side, we are going to use an outcome-based approach to monitor those programs. So whoever will come on stream with us, we are going to monitor your progress, and then only we will give the assistance accordingly. All right, with that, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Can you give her a bigger hand? Please louder a little bit. I think she was going very, very fast. And I was negotiating with the next speaker. So we started doing business here. So I bought her another 10 minutes, but she didn't use all the 10 minutes. So anyway, I think, like I said earlier, she has got a plane to catch. So question and answer time on this topic. Anyone have a comment or a question to make? If anyone? If none, I will just give a summary because I'm also very much involved in SME operation. Now, this is my perception. I think that most engineers, they do not make use of the SME Corp. So I think the 25 minutes given to the speaker here, it will sound very, very strange to you. But never mind, they got a very good website. You go in, and please take up the offer. Anytime you are in Kuala Lumpur, you can go to the SME Corp building, which is in KL Central. The building which is green in color. And if you walk into the lobby, you see giant-sized fans on the ceiling. That is the building. You go there, they have lots of officers, big space, and they are very happy to talk to you and make you understand all the incentives and the support that is going to be given by the very well-trained officers there that will help us to, especially engineering firms, to understand better what we can do and how we can improve our services, especially introducing us into new markets, and all the grants given. So I believe in 25 minutes, it was almost impossible for you to do it, but you tried your best. So let's give her another big round of applause. So before you go, I have got something for you. Where's the souvenir? Somewhere? You have to do all these things.
So sorry about that.
It's all right. Photographer? First of all, we give you a certificate.
Yeah, I'm a full-fledged engineer now.
We'll give you a book on engineering,
Yeah.
so you know
Lot of
how
homework.
engineers work. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
You go, huh?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, all. Bye. Okay, now let's get back to our program. The next speaker for this afternoon is none other than Mr. Aziz Tan Sri Bahman. He is the Deputy President, Master Builders Association of Malaysia. He has many, many years of experience in doing business. So today he will share with us his experience on the service sectors for liberalization, opportunities and challenges from the builder's perspective. Tan Sri.
As you from my CV, I'm not an engineer. I'm overwhelmed by all the engineers here. If I ask who are the contractors here, I think nobody is a contractor here. And actually the contractors, good contractors need engineers, but good engineers does not need contractors. That's only different. So I think we are producing more contractors than engineers in Malaysia today. So we are worried about that. Anyway, I try to complete my presentation within the time given because I do not wish to get the warning letter. And then for your information, to make you happy, there's no test. So the first slide of my presentation is, I think this topic we have covered from morning. I think our friend here also have covered mode of supply of services. I think it just, we go through only because everybody already understand what is the mode of supply of services. And liberalization of Malaysian services sector. This is to re-emphasize again that what we have spoken this morning, that ASEAN, through ASEAN Framework Agreement of Services, I think we all understand already by now. And I would like to touch upon the construction services. Yeah? The problem that you can see from this sector is due to lack of technical feasibility, construction services normally involve companies who work in the second country. This is some of the problem that is faced by the contractors at the moment within this region. It's also involved other assigned construction professional personnel and workers who work in the second country. And the next slide is the mode of supply, which is already covered earlier in this morning. And then the commitment also given. I'll be very fast now. You see, the construction services actually, as you are aware, involve general construction work for buildings and civil engineering, installation and assembly work, building completion and finishing work as well. So if you look at the mode 1, 2, 3, 4, you will see, I can give you one example, the cross-border, as far as the contractor is concerned. Malaysian service supplier delivers service to other country or consumer from Malaysia. For instance, like Malaysian contractor going overseas, consultant, architectural works. Mode number 2, as for example, is just like our previous presenters have said, tourism services in Malaysia supply to non-resident. And mode number 3 is Malaysian services supplier set up business. I think we all covered that. And slide number 5 and 6. Liberalization of the construction sector on the ongoing locally abroad within ASEAN Free Trade Agreement on service. There are many things that have developed. I can give you one example that we are proposing from Master Builders. That is, we have this regional Asia Pacific Federation of Contractors, as well as ASEAN Federation of Contractors. We meet regularly, and then we discuss those issues that will affect us when we reach that stage. We propose to have a consortium of contractors from ASEAN country in order to compete with non-ASEAN countries. I don't know whether that will work out or not. Slide number 9 and number 10, I think. Can we go? What is the implication as far as the construction industry is concerned? We have, as you are aware, the construction industry, there are many contractors who have gone overseas in the early days. Some of them successful, some of them are not very successful, but we already have an experience to do this. And then there are many Malaysian contractors are now merging into a big one in order to compete with outside contractors who will come later on. So with the liberalization, as far as the contractors is concerned, you can we are looking at it as opportunity, not as a problem. Because for those contractors from overseas who want to do business, they have to register with CIDB, and CIDB have their own regulation to protect the local contractor. And then this gives the opportunity for Malaysian contractor to go overseas, to do a bigger job and to undertake a job that the local in that country cannot do. Okay, I think the constraint. Let us talk about the constraint as far as the contractor is concerned. Most of the problem that we anticipate is the survival of the local smaller contractor in the domestic market. This have to be addressed by the government, and as far as the survival of contractor in the global market, there will be a lack of. In order for the contractor to survive in the global market, we foresee some problem. There is lack of financial support, such as the limit country quotas imposed by Exim Bank, as well as because as you know, the Exim Bank of China is very rich. They have a lot of money. They can support the Chinese contractor to go anywhere in any part of the world. That the Malaysian government also, I think, have done something to the Exim Bank in order to be more competitive. And then, as a contractor going overseas in the global market, there is a need for the support from the government. This is something that Malaysian government have done in the past. And then we really depend on the support of the government by securing some job, government to government. This is where CIDB will play a greater role here. And then the other problem we'll face is the competent, skilled workforce. We may go to one country who have a lot of workforce, but it's not a skilled workforce. So this may be another problem for us. And then there is a lack of information on other countries, because some contractors, they just simply go there because they see the opportunity there, but they do not have the real picture of law, the country, regulation, and different culture. So as for the recommendation from the Master Builders, number one, we would like to improve the contractors' competitiveness by providing incentive for adoption of advanced construction method, mechanization and automation, IBS example. There is a need also to upgrade the human resource, that is training and managerial supervisory skill. And the next one is strengthening domestic regulations. There is a need for us to enforce a Fair Trade Practice Act as far as the building material is concerned, which is not really being imposed now. The next one is to impose strict requisite for foreign contractor registration based on the track record, performance, and necessary full-time personnel resources with proper qualification. I think this is being handled by CIDB under the Ministry of Work. Next, to improve professional standard. This will be undertaken by the professional board like IEM. We did mention earlier in the paper earlier. And improve professional standard. Then accreditation of skill standard, including the foreign workers. This also been done cautiously. And the next one is the standardization of building material. This is also very important because some countries like Vietnam, they are using the Russian measurement. I think that's the only country within ASEAN that's using that. And then the contractor may have a different way of calculating the building material. So the next recommendation that we have is encourage forming of strategic alliance toward growing internationalization. That is in order to enhance competitiveness. There is a need for contractor to pool the resources to increase their capability, and then there is also need to encourage entrepreneurship among Bumiputra contractor. As you're aware that I don't think there is any Bumiputra contractor, real Bumiputra contractor, that have gone overseas on their own. The next one is to set up one-stop resource center for construction industry. This center, there is a need for this center in order to compile the latest and up-to-date information on the country report, market research, liberalization, etc., and to decimate latest information on the industry player. Okay, these are from the perspective of the contractors. Now the conclusion. As far as the master builders is concerned, because we are representing the industry, with liberalization, construction player in this region will be exposed to a stronger competitors in terms of material and labor costs and technology. There is also a need for the industry players and the government in this region to identify areas of growth to enhance competitiveness in order to further establish our local player, not just in Malaysia, but in the global arena. I think that's all for my short paper for this time, and then I will take any question if you have later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aziz.